Folks, just gone past top of the hour. Our next speaker is gearing himself up. I see he's been adjusting his tie and making sure everything's organized and straight. So Mpumelelo Mthembu, one of our very own from South Africa, a speaker, a leadership man, a family man, more importantly, I think, than anything else, and one of our Wisdom's Chats family men as well. And we've been absolutely privileged to have him on board in the Wisdom's Chats in the morning. So really looking forward to his chat with us all this afternoon. So Mpumelelo, I'm going to hand over to you so you can take it away. Welcome.
All right. Yeah. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you again for this platform and this opportunity. It's been fascinating since we started at 9 o'clock in the morning. And for me, just the variety of different personalities with approaches in the presentation, that for me has been absolutely mind-blowing. But moreover, the fact that you learn and pick up something from everyone, you know, all the way from Ben to Scott. Sally started us out in the morning, and that for me was quite great. And I think it also just shows the diversity in the world, but how you can pull it together for something of a good purpose. And that really speaks to me in a great way. Lots of issues around culture, Ben, that probably at some stage we'll get an opportunity to speak about, but there's a lot that was that resonated with me. Right. I tend to be very strategic in my thinking. In actual fact, if people were paid for just thinking, I would have been a billionaire by now. So I'm just trying to see how I show my presentation. Here I'm trying to share screen. All right. Okay, I'm not picking it up here, Ivan, but...
You should be at the bottom in the middle, Mpumelelo. There should be a green share screen button.
Yes, I've gone there, but it's not picking up.
Is your presentation open on your screen?
Yep, it's open on my screen, but it's not picking it up. It's only picking Google Drive. Okay.
Got it?
Sorry, I'll get there just now. Just a moment. I think I know what's happening.
You're doing a Trevor to us and you've got too many screens open. That's the problem.
Yes, all these things that have to be done all at the same time. So yeah, like I said, I tend to be strategic and more thinking in nature. But also let me say that with what I'm doing and getting into now, it's something fairly new, so I'm starting out. So the approach of the presentation is very much more strategic thinking of where one could go and what one could do. So yeah, I'll be coming from I found it. Thank you. So I'll be coming more from that direction. So just to introduce myself again, the name is Mpumelelo. I always do say that it's a name that I enjoy very much. And I registered my company in year 2010, so about 10 years ago. And I registered it as a Husiami Marketing and Projects. And when I registered it, my intention was to try and help a lot of the township businesses with their marketing. That's where I started. And I found that it was quite difficult. So I ended up just doing field research services. And interestingly, in me doing research, I had never done research before. I came straight from advertising, and I started out with this something new that I came across it while I was in advertising. 2014, I joined an incubator simply because one came from an environment where no one in your near family has ever done business. So everything has had to be a steep learning curve. Even today, it still is. So I don't have an uncle, I don't have a cousin, I don't have a brother that I can call and say, how do you do business? Or what do you do when things are like this? So that's why also Wisdom has just really been a great platform, because there's a lot of learnings and things that one is picking up from there. 2017, I tried partnering with certain people. This is where, Ben, I was saying conversation to have, because one of the biggest lessons I picked up from there was that it's important to share core values with people if you're going to be partnering with them. Otherwise, it becomes very difficult after that. Fortunately enough, in 2019, got two very big clients. If it weren't for that, I think 2020 and COVID would have been a very, very difficult time. But also, there's a principle that I hold in my business and hold in the family as well, that was very helpful in being able to float through during this time of COVID-19, but then I will explain that when we get there. All right. So the topic was that from 2020 July, where to from here? And I guess the question was coming largely from the fact that we are experiencing lockdown in South Africa and other parts of the world because of the corona virus. So Trevor, I stuck to the brief very much, and you'll see that the presentation tends to follow that. Obviously, with COVID-19, there was a whole unease that came from that. The questions that, what should one do now? And feeling scared that, am I going to be able to still have a business after this? Especially because in my case, when we locked down on the 23rd of March, everything dried up completely. So same experience as with Ben, because of me doing consulting. So yeah, companies simply, even projects that were up and coming, companies simply said, we are not spending anymore. We have to try and solve or deal and try to float. So when my income also dried up. So in trying to answer the question of where to from here, there's a Danish guy who was a philosopher. His name is Soren. He says that life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forward. So I took that and said, what is it that I can look backwards to, look into history, that then I can have some understanding from, and then use that in saying, how do I live life going forward, given the fact that COVID-19 also took place. So I did a little bit of history, and I looked at the history of pandemics. I'm not sure how well you can see on there, but that's a whole timeline of pandemics that have happened in the world since human beings existed. And towards the bottom of that, I'm not sure how clear that is as well. When you look at that, when you look at the recent history, it suggests that it takes plus minus 2 years for a pandemic to be almost eradicated or to be managed in. But also another thing that you pick up from the timeline is that pandemics are more frequent than they used to be. I mean, between 2000 and 2020, dealt with. Saying to me, there is a possibility that we may go through this again. And if we do, it tends to have an impact for 2 years. So it said to me, I need to build a business of time when things are difficult, but also set it up in such a way that it takes into mind that potentially and in the future, there's more pandemics that may take place. Still looking into the history, I looked into just the history of downturns. And even in that, it just pointed out that on average, a recession lasts for about 15 months. Again, this spoke to me in terms of, if things happen, have I built a business that's strong enough to last at least 15 to 24 months without any problems? And when I couldn't answer that question, then the question was, what are the things that I need to do that if this were to happen again, I have built enough resilience, I have built enough strong a business to be able to withstand a 2 months or 2.5 months experience of a downturn or a pandemic? So with that question, then I still looked into history to say, how have other businesses previously managed and handled such situations? Interestingly, I found a Harvard Business Review research. Remember, I am a researcher. I've done it for 10 years. So one way or another, research will come up in my presentation. So when Harvard did this research, it was a year-long research, and they were analyzing different strategies that different corporates have used during times of a downturn. And they looked at about 4,700 public companies, and they looked at the period before the recession, during the recession, and after the recession. One of the things they picked up is that generally there's two types of approaches that companies use. They either use an offensive approach or a defensive approach. And this, Ben, is going to speak a little bit to what you said earlier on about cutting people when companies are going through a difficult time. And that largely with a defensive approach is either you're reducing the number of employees or you're improving operational efficiency, or you're doing both, right? But for the offensive approach, it's either you're developing new markets or you're investing in new assets, or you're doing both. So when they looked at the 4,700 companies, they found that generally there's 4 types of responses that companies have to a slowdown. The first one was that either they use a prevention focus strategy. What that does is to completely only use defensive moves where you are cutting off people, or you're dealing with operational efficiencies. But all the prevention focused companies do is to focus on being defensive, focus on cutting costs. Then you have the opposite of that, which was the promotion focused companies. These guys, during a downturn, they focus on spending more and acquiring more assets. And that's the approach that they will do. But then the companies that they found that they tend to be more pragmatic companies. So they'll use a combination of defensive moves as well as offensive moves. And with that combination, they found that those companies tend to do a little bit better. However, that even the combination of offensive and defensive, there is a better combination. So what they did is to look at the prevention focus moves and the promotion focus moves. And I hope you're seeing this on your side on the slide. And they found that the best strategy, or the companies that fared better during a downturn, and even after a downturn, pick up quicker than any other companies, are the ones that focus on a strategy of operational efficiency, but also market development and asset investment at the same time. Now, if you look at the following graph, it shows you there how the different strategies fared after a downturn of some kind. And if you look at the progressive, those are the companies that increase operational efficiency, but also develop new markets while enlarging their asset bases as well. And this was interesting for me because beyond just showing which companies do better when there's difficult times, it also said to me, even as a person, you do better in difficult times when you focus on how do I become more efficient in what I do, but not just being defensive. It's like going to battle with only a shield. Yes, you will try as much as you can to protect yourself, but at the end, it's not going to be good enough that you're protecting yourself. In actual fact, they found that companies who cut off people during a difficult time do worse when the economy gets better, because now they had created a very negative environment with laying off people. But secondly, that now that there is the economy is moving the right direction, it's very now difficult to have to get that skill set back into the company again. Sony used that approach in 2008. And if you look at where Sony is now, they are struggling compared to other companies that are competitors to them. So then I also then looked at what has been the impact of the coronavirus, especially in South Africa, especially in my industry as well. Again, remember, this is all trying to answer the question of where do I go from here now that there is this situation and the economy is turning and there's a downturn, what do I do? Hence, I'd gone to look at the history. The history is telling me the best strategy is to look at operational efficiencies, see what asset base you can increase, but secondly, see what other markets you can get into. So in doing that, I then looked at how in my industry has COVID-19 affected spend. And I picked up 4 industries that are doing better, which was the financial services, the pharmaceutical, retail, as well as the technology companies. And therefore, it said to me, in the strategy of looking into new markets, probably these are some of the industries I should look into in terms of starting to build relationships and also get business from there. So from what you said earlier on, Scott, it was actually quite a nice strategy where you were saying, look, define exactly which industry you want to speak to and which people you want to speak to within that industry. And this was taking me to that direction to say, which would be the best industry that will fare better during the downturn, and that will also do better when things, when the economy is going the right direction. So this slide speaks to that. So then the question I had to myself is, where do the opportunities lie then, if it is that I'm looking to go into new markets and having picked up which industries are doing better? And for me, it was that almost 90%. So if you look at SWOT analysis on the bottom right-hand side, it's the opportunities. It was saying that almost 90% of the opportunities that I have and that I can try and exploit are technology driven, because technology is creating new fields for consultants, especially when it comes to digital transformation, but that also maybe I can automate my internal processes and then, develop cost-effective services that I can sell to companies that cannot afford what I'm currently offering. So yeah, I mean, Mahatma Gandhi then says the future depends on what you do today. And therefore, what I'm doing today was based on this bit of research that I've done in looking which companies did better during a lockdown and which companies are going to do better even after. So like I said already, where I am going from here is those strategies that I spoke about, developing new markets. Most of the work that I've done in mining and in FMCG. So I am looking to now look a little bit closer into the financial services industry to see how I can expand myself into that space, but also then developing new products. When I started earlier on, I did say that most of what I did was in market research. But now I have moved into consulting, where I really need to do, and I am passionate about doing a lot of work in leadership as well as management. This is for corporate companies. But then also, because of where I come from, let me go a little bit into that. So I sort of live in 2 worlds, in that South Africa is a country that has first world experience and third world experience, and I tend to live in both. And so my heart still does tend to have that thing that says, where I come from, there's a lot of people that are still struggling and are trying to make something of their lives. So the question that I was trying to answer with myself was to say, it's that what if question you were talking about earlier on, Ben. It was to say, what if I can use my consulting services to help the small businesses in the third world economy that cannot access and have not been assisted as much as the businesses that are experiencing the first world economy. So that's where, again, I was looking to develop new products in marketing for small businesses in townships. But then also what I have started doing and what I'm doing now is increasing efficiency. So I am automating some of the internal processes that I have. And at the same time, I am trying to see how do I operationalize some of what I do, but automate that as well. So automation is what I'm doing a lot of at the moment in trying to make sure that my costs are low, but also that I get where the economy turns around. So what's the strategy? So the strategy is that I'm changing the business model to a real estate business model. What do I mean by that? Firstly, because I am having to go into markets I've never been into before. My feeling was that the best thing I can do is to use a business model where I become a company that takes all these other professionals that have been laid off because of COVID-19 and help them to become consultants, but these consultants use my systems and processes to run their own small businesses, which is how generally the real estate works, because you'll have a principal agent, and the agent will have all these real estate people that have their own small companies, but using his support system to make a living. So for me, this model was going to address a couple of things. Firstly, try and see that those who are unemployed but are professionals can find employment by being consultants themselves. And them being consultants and having the skill that they have will help me get into the markets that I have not been into before, nor have the experience in, and therefore expanding myself in that way. So it covers those two things. But also it will deal with the issue of me not having the IT skills that are needed to make a business more a digital business. And so part of the plan is I get IT people, I help them to be consultants while they help me to build the digital part of the business. So that's where I am currently, and that's what I am doing in trying to build the business further and changing the business model in that way. Personally, I would like to be in a position that the company is able to run optimally without me having to be operational, because like I said, when I started, I'm very much a strategic person. I'm not too big, nor do I find that great an excitement in operations. So I just need to build a team of people who can take care of that. But with all that in place, I'd love to be in a position where I can just start being a speaker. I was very much encouraged by the fact that there's a couple of speakers on this summit, as well as to write books, but generally to be a change agent. So those are the things that I would like to get into. One last thing that I wanted to share that speaks to experiences that I have is to this line that I have here that says the best way to prepare is to simply live by solid financial principles, which is to avoid debt, build savings, invest for the long term. The reason why I've put this on here is that in my business and at home, we have this, we call it a 7-year principle. So it comes from the Bible where Joseph, Egypt was going to have 7 years of plenty and 7 years of a drought or a famine. And so we use this principle that says, when we are doing well, when our businesses are doing well, we do not spend a lot. We do not use money a lot. That's when we save, that's when we invest. And that when things become difficult, or in the world, the economy is going down. That's when we spend. That's when we, and I found that this has been very helpful during this time of a downturn. We've been able to coast through, survive, do what I need to do, buy assets, because when the business was doing very well, that's when we put money away. And now that there isn't much money around in the system, that's what we're using to build the assets, and for me to build the company to take advantage of the opportunities that might be coming up in the future. So yeah, I think that's me in a nutshell. I don't know if anyone has any questions or contributions that they would want to make on this. So I'm trying to find the right view as well here.
Thanks, Mpumelelo. I think, yeah, if you just, should be able to stop sharing at the top if you finished with the presentation, or I can probably stop it for you if it would help.
Yeah, I think you do it for me on your side.
Okay.
There you go.
There we go. Right, folks. Thanks for switching off your video. We had a few hiccups on the sound there, but it all sounds good at the moment. So you can.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, that was only minor ones. But I just asked folk to switch off the video, just to help with that. So that's why everyone went dark on you. But it wasn't they weren't listening. It was just that we had a couple of blips on the sound side of things. But yeah, fascinating research, Mpumelelo. Really appreciate those insights. You clearly dug in and did what you're good at, and got some great research and some great insights in terms of how people actually have managed previously through similar situations and crises. So I think it was really good to see all that information, and the way you laid it out was great. So right, yeah. So I'm not too sure if there are any specific questions. Folks, you'd like to come online, raise your hand or unmute your Edward. Yeah, let's get across to you.
Yeah, thanks for that great analysis. I thought it was really interesting that actually the downturn doesn't last forever, but that slide with the previous pandemics, I couldn't quite see the detail, and there were two big blobs on there. And I imagine one of those big blobs was the Spanish flu during the war. What was the other big blob?
The other one was it was the Chinese. It wasn't called the Chinese flu though, but it's a pandemic that took place in China. With that particular one, what happened is it did not become pandemic in a sense that it became global, but there were a number of lives that were lost in China specifically, and in some parts of the world. I'm gonna go there again and find it for you, and then I'll tell you in detail what it was called.
While Mpumelelo is doing that, I do want to just add an interesting, it's one of those useless pieces of information, but might be interesting anyway, is that the Spanish flu is not called the Spanish flu because it originated in Spain. I'm not actually sure quite originated, but it was first reported in Spain. So they were, the journalists, the newspapers in Spain were the first to highlight that it was in existence and that it was rife in the country. And the term Spanish flu then just stuck. Told you, useless piece of information.
Yeah. So the biggest one, Edwards, have been the Spanish flu, but the other big blob was it's HIV that has taken about 25 to 35 million people. So that's been quite big in number, whereas the Spanish flu was also 40 and 50 million. So that's why they quite big. But the next two big ones, just for interest sake, was what was called the third plague. I've actually looked at that. There was 10, 12 million people, but that was back then. That was in 1855. And then you had the Black Death that took 200 million lives, but that was in the 1,300. So yeah, the other big blob was HIV/AIDS, or is rather.
Good, right, Trevor. Yeah, let's get across to you.
Yeah, if I can jump in here, you talk of enjoying the strategic and not really the operational, and you've had 120 days now to reorganize your entire life, what you've been doing. So I'd like just an idea of what is the size of your operation? Were you a man alone consultant, or did you have a couple of people in your team? And over the next 6 months to 12 months, in fact, I'd like to get an idea of what your timing is for this next expansion of your growth that you were talking about.
Sorry, I'm trying to remember your first question. Oh, okay, it's come to me again. So I have been working as a man alone all this time. So what I tended to do, especially on the research side, is that when I get in a project, I have a database of people that I call in and create a team out of that. The only thing that I've picked up that's a challenge with that is then you can only access the markets that you've been targeting, because the people you're calling in only have the skill set within what you are doing at that moment in time. Whereas now the strategy is, there are a lot of people that are losing work. Probably there's an engineer somewhere that has lost work. And if I can get that person and help them to plug into my business, or using the systems of my business to become a consultant themselves, then all of a sudden I can get you into a space that I don't necessarily have the background knowledge of, but I can use my support system while they add the knowledge. The timeline on that is I've actually already started on that process. So there's two things I'm doing currently. I'm running a research survey in leadership as well as in management. So I'm speaking to people that are in corporate so that I can understand those pain points we were speaking about. But secondly, to see how I can position myself differently and how I can add value. So currently, as we speak, almost every day I'm running a research survey online, but also having one-on-one interviews. And then the second thing that I'm doing is I've already started creating the database of the skill set that I need. So as I speak to executives and companies, I ask them, do you know anyone who's an engineer, anyone who is a process engineer person that I can see if I can help them to start their businesses. So those are running simultaneously. I'm doing them now. I am hoping that come end of August, everything that I need to put in place is there, so that come September, I am already promoting myself. And this is where what Scott spoke about earlier on will come into play.
So all I want to jump in and suggest here, and I'm sure someone else wants to ask questions, but I just want to suggest, just from the speakers alone, add another 10 to 20 people that you've been connecting with through the Wisdom's Chats forums. Add another 50 to 100 that we could be expanding into over the next 30, 60 days, considering that we're growing to 100 exhibitors strong by the 24th of September. All of those people, I suggest, would want to be your partner. Are you willing to partner with them?
Absolutely. I mean, for me, collaboration is probably the biggest thing, because you're multiplying yourself and getting into places you ordinarily wouldn't be able to. So definitely collaboration is key. You know, when I was looking at some of the research, because there's a lot I looked at, it's just I didn't include it on the slides. But one of the things that was said about consulting companies specifically that survive during difficult times is that they can offer a variety of services, such that when one goes down, another one goes up. So in consulting, what you find is in a downturn, consultants that deal with operational issues tend to make more money because every company is trying to see how they can change their operations. Whereas if you're doing HR related consultants, that's the first one that they cut off. So because the big companies can offer both, when one goes up, the other one sustains them. And I can do that without becoming a big company if I collaborate with somebody else who has the skill in process engineering and process management. So in short, I'm saying to you, definitely I am willing to collaborate with others.
Okay, the rest of you can all go. This is now a private session between Mpumelelo and myself. Who muted me?
Yeah, I did, Trevor. You know, you've got to keep you in check, you know, otherwise you run away with things here. So, yeah, you know, it's an interesting perspective that you bring up there, and I actually want to toss this back into Ben's court because we, you know, speaking about culture, and now we're putting together these agile, fluid teams potentially in environments, and I mean I like to call it the Hollywood business model because you've got a project, you bring the right skills together. You know, the project happens and the people go their ways again. And how does culture get developed, or does it get developed when you have this kind of fluidity in workforce and fluidity potentially in relationships in business?
That's a great question. I tend to work with the same people over and over again. So there is a shared kind of stream of values. But I guess the same thing happens in sports teams. You know, people are traded left, right, backwards and forwards and all over the shop. And there's, you know, change of personnel constantly. There generally has to be, in my opinion, a clear, really well-defined, this is who we are and these are the values we hold. And certainly when you look at sports teams, I'm a big fan of American football and the San Francisco 49ers. And over the last couple of years, you can see that culture. Sorry, BJ. You can see that culture coming together, and you can see that culture, you know, when they're bringing teams in, but actually this is a team game. They're bringing, you know, players in, but it's a team game. We're here for the team. And there haven't really been any superstars on that team yet. They managed to get to the Super Bowl because they were really clear about the value base they put in. So I think you still need to do that, perhaps on a short-term basis for the project. But yeah, in order for that to work well, really, really clear about purpose and values.
Great, thanks, Ben. Yeah, and I love the sporting analogy. I think it's an excellent one. Yes, Lee.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks. Sorry, BJ. I'll just pop in here, and then it'd be great to hear from you. I just, Mpumelelo, wow! When you say you're a researcher, I mean that was so phenomenal. You know, you actually do need that grounding and foundation, don't you? Is to be able to, and I loved the way that you put it in context, and I think that's the value of the research, is to be able to say, okay, this is not a unique situation. It may play out in unique ways, and each of us are going to do it uniquely, but it does actually give you, it certainly gives me a level of assurance that we've been here before as human beings and we've come through it. And what I didn't like is when you said we may face another pandemic in our lifetime, and that did not appeal to me at all. And I think there are many people here on this platform who, you know, we've come through 9/11, we've come through the 2008 recession, now we've got a pandemic. I feel like there's been enough historical crises in our lifetime. I can't deal with another pandemic. Mind you, HIV was also, I mean, within our lifetime. So all of these things, I think, so that's what I really value, is being able to say, let's look at the history, not because we're going to do things exactly the way they did it, but that there are lessons that can be learned. And what can we pull through that are valuable, because we still remain human beings. And that I just got a tremendous amount of hope from what you were sharing.
I think for me, Lee, the history part was largely it helps you to prepare, because you sort of know what shape things tend to take when they go a certain direction. And the preparation for me became quite critical, because it then said, you've been through COVID. If anything of a similar nature were to happen again, would you find yourself in the same spot? Or would you have changed and prepared such that when it happens, you were aware of it and you know that it takes a minimum 2 years to go through such a scenario? It wouldn't help for me to prepare for a 3 months experience when something takes 2 years, because soon I'll be in trouble. You know, conventional wisdom used to say that you must have at least 3 months or 6 months worth of a salary in your bank account to survive, or if you want to start a business. But this is suggesting to me that you should rather build a business that could survive a 2-year experience. Then you would know you would have put something in place that's great.
That's also what I take out of what you've shared, Mpumelelo, is, and you point to it in terms of your own practice as a family, and that is discipline. And to, you know, to use the word preparation, but in order to prepare for the possibility of these things, there's a certain amount of discipline that we don't overspend in good times, and we don't you know, underspend in bad times, that that there's this rhythm to life, that you are living life to the full, but with a sense of we preparing for good and bad, and so neither is going to throw us off our game, and that's also just it's a great lesson, not easy to learn, not easy to implement, because you know that after lockdown, you know, we all got to drink and go wild and have our parties and, you know, let our hair down, because we haven't for 40 days, and our lives will come apart if we don't do these things.
Yeah. Right, Vijay, you wanted to add in some comments there.
Actually, no, it was towards Ben, but we've been chatting, so that issue, I hope, has been resolved.
Yeah, well, you know, I find it fascinating that we've got someone from the UK talking about American football. You know, I fully expected him to come out with Liverpool or Manchester or somebody like that, and then he goes completely across the ocean and somewhere else. So yeah, beautiful.
Well, not to diminish the popularity of UK football, but Ben's got good taste.
I was going to talk about rugby, but we're hosted by South Africa, so I'm not going there.
Trevor got into that one with Sally this morning already, so yeah, we won't go down that route. But yeah, you know, again, if anybody else would like to add in some thoughts or comments, you know, I think what Lee said about the value of that kind of research that Mpumelelo has done is it just highlights, you know, the value and the quality of really good research, and what it can actually do in terms of your decision making.
I couldn't agree more. And forgive me if I mispronounce the name, Mpumelelo. I beg your pardon. Please forgive me. But I couldn't agree more.
Sorry, BJ, it's marshmallow.
It's marshmallow?
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more on the collaboration point. It is, and I probably will be expressing that here in a few minutes as well. It is crucial. And it not only goes to the research that you have been working on phenomenally, thumbs up to you on that, but it also speaks to the business culture. And because of the pandemic, we need to consider that even more in our strategic planning going forward. So good job. Good job.
Thanks, BJ. Yeah, and you can just pronounce his name Success, because that's the English translation of his name. So Just call him Success. He answers to that one as well.
I will do
that. Master, let's get across to you.
Yeah, thanks, Mpumelelo, for the quite inspirational presentation. You actually made me feel that I came very late to this platform to really tap into your wisdom in as far as the presentation that we've just made. I'm also trying to be a researcher myself, but maybe I need to visit you for a day or two to pick up on those skills. But my research is, or my interest is more into one of the most difficult industries, which is farming, and where issues of transformation and culture are quite a big of a challenge, and we really need to look at who, I mean, the consultants in that area of work. Those that seem to be wanting to drive transformation or changing the culture or providing leadership, by the way, because even the thought leaders in that industry, they are still held back. So I was actually, what my question was or is, have you ever thought of that particular industry and even those other industries that you would like to go into, their receptivity in terms of the new approach? Because you've got a benefit of the research, you've got facts with you, but the market out there, still people are still far behind. They're still grappling as to where from here in terms of COVID. Even if you are forward looking as a researcher, you know, have you thought of, you know, the receptivity from your potential clients, and yeah, and what approach, I mean, bringing in? I think Benjamin's presentation quite, you know, strike, I mean, broader into your presentation and yeah, the whole culture thing, because definitely we really need change agents as a country. And I mean, we have people employed at very strategic positions as transformation agents, but the reality of the market out there, some of them do not even have access to such information, let alone the research that we have gone so deep into. Yeah.
In all honesty, I haven't looked at farming per se that much. But I do know that I'd come across a research at some stage that said farming in the future is going to become even more important. It does mention why food security is going to be challenged in the future. So anyone who is in farming is in a good space. It will turn to your favor. And in actual fact, we do need farmers to do better. Otherwise, the food security is going to be an issue. In terms of receptivity of what I'm putting out there, so when I said I was starting the research, part of doing that research is I've started conversations online with different people so that we can speak about the challenges of the culture that you were talking about earlier on, Ben, but also how that culture then disempowers some of the people that are in executive positions and leadership and so forth. So from that conversation, Master, it's helping me to understand what language to use and how to structure what I'm trying to do in a way that it speaks to the pain points. So that's why I started specifically with the research, was so that, yes, I have an idea of what I want to do, but I think doing this research and starting these conversations would place what I'm trying to do squarely on what the problem is, and secondly, how to put it out there so that it's received. And to be honest, I'm really enjoying these conversations, but moreover, the amount of problems and the amount of issues these conversations have raised up, it says there's a lot that needs to be done, even culturally. Just to be controversial a little bit, you do find that in South Africa, there will be certain cultures that are dominant, and those cultures then do not allow life to other types of cultures. So you find that when you get into a corporate space, it does create a bit of a difficult environment. I'm not sure if I've answered your question, but hopefully I have.
Yeah, yes, you did. Yeah, I think to a large extent, I think the biggest problem, I think, given the new definition of culture that I got today, that of a strong and a weak culture versus the good and the bad culture, I think we are more stuck into the good and the bad culture. We need to transcend to a weak and a strong culture so that we are able to, drive that transformation that we need. And our traditional approach to culture and diversity is letting us down a bit in terms of, creating those new markets that you are talking about. Yeah, but I'm happy with the answer here.
Thanks so much, Master. Thanks, Mpumelelo. Really great insights. Is there anybody else who would like to make a comment or ask any questions? Otherwise, we'll just take a break for 5 minutes before we introduce BJ. So anybody else want to mention anything? Put up a hand. Gone. Mpumelelo, you are amazing. Thank you so much. Such a great presentation. I think it's one of those ones that we'll be able to go back to over and over and remind ourselves of this really, meaty information. So thank you for that. And so
if you don't mind, Lee, I just feel it in me that I'd like to stress this one. For me, when I was looking at this research, especially the Harvard one, it was so fascinating that the most natural response in a difficult time is to cut off. And yet that's the response that lands you into trouble. And that for me was quite something else.
It was eye-opening, yeah. And my husband is often quotes, the one thing we learn from history is that we don't learn from history. And I think what you're doing is putting it in front of us to say, let's not make the same mistakes. In wisdoms, we talk about the fact that knowledge is everywhere. Information is everywhere. There's no secret to success. It's all around us. We're swimming in it. And it's that the wisdom is to be able to actually take that knowledge on board and do something about it. So that's really where the rubber's going to meet the road. So thank you for putting the information, that's the first step to empowerment, is having the information. Now it's up to us to do something about it. And that's, so thank you for that, for informing, inspiring, and empowering. Really, really great. So Ivan, I was sort of introducing a little bit of a break, but is that okay that we all just take a step back for a second, and then you'll introduce BJ and we'll go from there?
100%. I'm waiting for the goosebumps to start, so we'll we'll get going. We'll get going with that one shortly. So again, Mpumelelo, absolute privilege having you give us those insights and that information. I think it's opened our eyes to many things, as have most of our speakers today, which has been superb. So thanks so much for your time and the effort that went into putting all of that together. So I think a really special set of information that you presented there. So thank you.